What happens when the clingy best friend? She warned everyone about walks into the office tower lobby with a calm face, while she is handed a civil complaint for every lie she posted about him. How does the man who was told he would ruin their bond by loving her become the husband who quietly documents each twist of her story, then lets the law answer for him when she finally regrets rejecting him? Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. My name is Elias Lowry, and for most of my life, I believe my feelings were the biggest danger to the people I loved. Years ago, when I finally told my best friend I was in love with her, she looked me straight in the eye and said I would ruin our bond if I ever said those words again. I apologized, stepped back, and tried to become small enough to keep her comfortable. Somehow, we still ended up married. For a while, I thought that meant I had been right to speak, and that love had won in the end. Now I watch her tell our story to strangers as a warning about men like me. Online, I am the clingy friend who pushed too hard, the obsessive husband who cannot handle boundaries. People who have never met me call me dangerous in the comments while I sit in the next room, reading every word in silence. She says she regrets ever giving me a chance. I am not here to fight her feelings. I am here to talk about facts, about what happens when someone turns your heart into content, and about the day the story finally had to meet paper. My name is Elias Lowry, and the first time Jade told me I could ruin something by loving her, we were standing in my tiny kitchen with the window open and the city noise drifting in. We were younger then, just out of school, still calling each other best friends like it was a permanent title. I remember the way my hands shook as I wiped a perfectly clean counter, trying to find the courage to say what had been living in my chest for years. I told her I had started to see her differently, that my feelings were not just friendly anymore, that I did not want to lie by pretending it was nothing. She did not smile or look confused. She leaned back against the fridge, crossed her arms, and said in a very calm voice that I was about to ruin the only good bond she had. She said every man tried to turn friendship into romance and then blamed the woman when it broke. She said she needed one safe person in her life, and that if I forced this, I would become just another danger. I remember feeling the word danger like a hand on my throat. I apologized right away, said I would forget what I had said we could stay friends. She told me not to say love again, not even as a joke. That night, after she left, I stood alone in the kitchen and told myself I could make my feelings smaller. For a while, I tried. I kept going to movies with her, kept listening to her talk about other men, kept pretending it was enough. Life has a strange sense of humor, though. Years later, after a bad breakup with someone else, Jade began to lean on me more. She said she felt safe around me, said I was the only person who had never left. We spent more evenings together, cooking simple food, watching terrible shows. One night, she sat on my couch and said she had been stupid before, that I was the only person who truly understood her. She said maybe we should try dating after all. I did not push, I did not insist. I just listened, heart hammering, and then said in a slow voice that I was willing if she was sure. She said she was, and a year later, we were married. For a while, it felt like proof that honesty had been worth it, that love had not ruined anything. We would sit in the same living room and tell the "we started as best friends" story to people who came over. Back then, she still called it sweet. That version did not last. The first time I heard her change it, we were older, and the living room felt smaller. She sat on the sofa with her laptop open on her knees, working on a new post for her emotional wellness page. She said she wanted to talk about how dangerous it was when men could not take a hint from their female friends. She asked if I remembered when I confessed to her. I said yes, of course I remembered. She laughed a little and said it was kind of messed up now that she thought about it, that she had told me not to say those words, and I had said them anyway. I reminded her, gently, that I had told her once, not again, and that I backed off when she asked. She said it did not matter, that I had still put her in an unsafe position by confessing it all. She said she wanted to use it as an example. I stood in the doorway, leaning on the frame, and asked if she could at least keep it general. I said I did not want to be clearly recognizable if people who knew us read it. She told me I was being selfish, that her feelings mattered more than my comfort. She said I was trying to control her story, and that this was exactly the kind of thing her followers needed to hear. I did not shout or tell her to stop. I said I understood she wanted to help people, and that I did not want to silence her. I only asked her to be fair. She rolled her eyes and said fairness was a word people used when they wanted to hide from their own behavior. Then she turned back to her screen and started typing, fingers moving fast. Later that night, when she went to shower, I sat where she had been and opened her page. The post was already live. She had written about a girl whose best friend confessed feelings after she begged him not to ruin their bond, about how he would not hear her no, about how she had felt pushed and guilty until she finally gave in and dated him. She did not use my name, but she mentioned his quiet job in tech, his careful habits, the way he cooked for her and sat with her through breakups. Anyone who knew us well would understand. The comments came fast. People wrote that her friend sounded manipulative, that he had trapped her with guilt. They warned other women not to let friends like that get close. I stared at the words and felt like I was seeing my own face through broken glass. I did not comment. I did not send her a message. I pressed the buttons on my phone to take a screenshot, then another when more comments appeared. I opened the Notes app and typed the date, the time, and a short description. Post about friend who ruined bond with feelings, clear details about me. It felt strange to write about myself like this, like a case file, but my hands kept moving. After that, I went out to the balcony. The air was cool, the street noise soft. I opened a simple spreadsheet and put 4 columns at the top: day, place, story, witness. In the first line, I wrote today's date, living room, bond story post, and followers. It looked small and clean on the screen, almost harmless. Inside, Jade left the bathroom and walked into the bedroom. I heard the soft brush of the door as it closed. At that exact moment, my phone lit up with a calendar reminder I had not created. It read, Harbor Cafe, 6:15 p.m. Meeting personal. The time was set for the next evening. I stared at the words, then at the thin crack of light under the bedroom door. I did not open the reminder or ask about it. I cleared the notification, saved the spreadsheet, and put the phone face down on the balcony table, feeling for the first time that if she was going to keep turning our bond into a story for strangers, I might need a different kind of memory than hers to survive what was coming. The morning after the Harbor Cafe reminder flashed on my screen, I went to work feeling like someone had changed the air in my lungs. The open-plan floor looked the same as always, with rows of desks, soft chatter, and the constant hum of machines. I put my bag down, turned on my monitor, and told myself to focus on tickets and passwords instead of posts and feelings. It worked for about 10 minutes. Then I heard my name said in a low voice behind me, followed by a short laugh. I turned my chair slightly and saw 2 coworkers from another team standing by the window with their phones. One of them said that he had watched a long post about a girl whose best friend ignored her no and later became her husband. He said the guy seemed creepy and sad. The other said it reminded her of me in a strange way because I had known my wife for years before we married. Their eyes flicked toward my desk for a second. They did not say my name again, but I did not need them to. I turned back to my screen and opened a support ticket, my fingers on the keyboard moving by habit while my ears kept catching bits of their talk. One of them said that the girl in the story was very brave and that men like that needed to hear the word no louder. I already knew the story they meant. At break time, I went to the small kitchen for coffee. Nadia was there, leaning against the counter with a mug in her hand. She watched me for a moment and then asked in a careful tone if I had seen a new thread from a wellness account that looked a lot like Jade's. I said that I had seen some of Jade's recent posts. She said some people in the office were talking about it, and that some parts sounded close to what I once told her about how Jade and I met. She did not judge. She simply observed. I felt my shoulders tense. I told her that my private life was more complicated than a thread, and that I was trying to keep work separate. She nodded and said she understood, but that I should know perception sometimes reached HR before facts did. After lunch, an email appeared in my inbox from HR. The subject line said they wanted a quick meeting that afternoon regarding well-being and online content. My chest tightened, but I clicked open and accepted the time without arguing. There was no point pretending not to notice. The HR room was painted in soft colors and had a plant in the corner, as if comfort could be arranged like furniture. Mr. Paxton asked me to sit. He kept his hands folded on the table and explained that some staff had approached him after seeing posts about an obsessive best friend turned husband who ignored boundaries, checked locations, and made a woman feel unsafe. He said my name was not in the posts, but people believed the story might be about me and Jade. He said he was concerned about my well-being and about any risk that the situation at home might spill into the office. I listened without interrupting, even when the words felt like nails under my skin. When he finally paused, I told him, in a calm voice, that my wife enjoyed sharing personal stories online and that sometimes her version was not the complete truth. I said I had never hurt her, never stopped her from working or seeing friends, and never raised a hand to her. I admitted that we were having problems and that I was not happy with how she was using our history as content, but I repeated that I did not intend for those problems to collide with my work. I did not call her a liar. I did not ask him to choose sides. I simply stated facts. He said he believed me, but that the company had to be careful. He mentioned policies about harassment and professional image. He said perception could affect my role even if the details were different. The words were soft, but the message under them was hard. When he finished, I asked if I could have copies of whatever had been shown to him. I said I wanted to understand what others were seeing so I could respond in a responsible way. My tone stayed easy. I did not raise my voice or sound offended. He looked at me for a moment, then turned to his computer and printed a few pages. He slid a plain folder across the table. The folder had no label, no logo, just a weight that felt heavier than paper should. I thanked him and said I would do my best to make sure nothing from my personal life disturbed the office. Back at my desk, I did not open the folder right away. I placed it beside my keyboard and answered 2 routine tickets, forcing myself to think about software instead of stories. When the floor became a little quieter, I opened the folder. Inside were blurred screenshots of Jade's posts. Even with the details softened, I recognized her profile picture, her writing style, and the way she structured her lessons. One image showed the line about a best friend who confessed after she begged him not to ruin their bond. Another showed the part where she said he later used guilt and love to push her into a relationship she never wanted. My job field, my habits, and parts of my personality were described in enough detail that anyone close to us could match the pieces. I read them slowly. My heart hurt, but my hands did not shake. When I had finished, I closed the folder and pulled my keyboard closer. On my desktop, I created a new folder and named it Archive A. Inside it, I made another called Archive B. Then I opened the scanner app and fed in the printed pages one by one, saving the files into a subfolder called Work. Each time a page finished, a small cloud sync message appeared in the corner of the screen, saying a file had been uploaded successfully. The message was simple and repetitive, and for some reason it comforted me more than any kind words that day. The files were no longer just in someone else's hands. They also existed in mine. When the workday ended, I packed my bag more slowly than usual. The office lights dimmed in sections as people left. On my way toward the elevator, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I took it out and saw a missed call from a number listed only as private. Under it, my calendar still showed the reminder for Harbor Cafe 6:15 p.m. Meeting, Pariwan, Ulper Personal, scheduled for that evening. The time was getting close. I did not call the number back. I did not message Jade to ask where she was. At almost the same moment, my manager stepped out of her office and asked if we could have a quick word the next day about some ongoing concerns related to social media. I told her that the next day was fine. As the elevator doors closed in front of me, the phone screen dimmed and reflected my face. I saw my own eyes looking back, tired but clear, and I thought that if her story was going to walk so easily into my workplace, I needed to be ready for the day when it walked into a very different kind of room. The night of the open mic show felt like a test I had not agreed to take. Jade had spent days talking about it, saying her agency was hosting a Bond Stories theme at a rooftop bar. She said Theo had asked her to perform something with him because they had such powerful chemistry on stage. She added that I should come to show I was not threatened by healthy connections. I told her calmly that I did not feel threatened by her work, only by the way she told our history. She said I was being dramatic, and that this was about art, not us. I went anyway, because staying home would become another piece of her story. The rooftop bar sat high above the city, with strings of warm lights and little tables pressed close together. The air smelled like smoke and sweet drinks. Jade walked a few steps ahead of me, moving through the crowd as if she belonged to the lights. Theo waited near the makeshift stage, holding a small notebook. When he saw her, he opened his arms wide. She stepped into the hug and laughed in a way she rarely used with me anymore. She introduced me to someone as her long-term Bond experiment, and the person laughed, not knowing I had once been just her friend who tried not to ruin anything. I stood a little back and watched. The performances started with other people. Poets talked about grief and work, musicians sang about breakups. I tried to listen, but my eyes kept drifting to Jade and Theo at a small table, their heads close, his pen moving as she gestured with her hands. Every now and then she glanced over at me and then turned back to him with a small shake of her head, as if telling him something sad and complicated. When it was their turn, the host called them 2 brilliant storytellers from the agency. People clapped and lifted their phones. Jade and Theo walked to the front. Theo held a guitar, but this time he mostly played soft notes in the background. Jade took the microphone and said they wanted to tell a story about how love can ruin a safe bond. She said it was loosely based on real events. The crowd made an interested sound. My chest tightened. She began describing a girl who had a best friend she trusted more than anyone. She said the friend confessed his love after she begged him not to, that he kept saying his feelings were heavy and that she owed him a chance because he had always been there. She made him sound like a trap. She said she eventually dated him out of guilt. Theo added lines about how some men call guilt romance and call pressure fate. He played the calm hero in the wings, the one who respected her no and waited to save her when she escaped. People laughed in the right places. Some shook their heads like they knew the man in the story. I heard the words obsession and danger mixed with phrases about boundaries and healing. They did not say my name, but Jade described the man's quiet job in tech, his careful habits, his cooking, and his long friendship with her. It was more than enough. I felt several eyes turn toward me at the back. I forced my hands to stay loose at my sides. I did not move toward the stage, did not interrupt, did not shout that this version of our life was twisted. Somewhere near the front, a small group of coworkers from Jade's agency cheered loudly. I saw at least 3 phones held up, recording the whole thing. A girl near the bar lined up her shot so both Jade on stage and me in the background were visible. Her phone flash popped once as she took a photo before switching fully to video. I understood in that moment that this performance would not end on the rooftop. It would travel just like the posts. When the piece ended, the crowd clapped and someone called it brave. Jade and Theo bowed and hugged. As they came down, Jade brushed past me and said in a bright tone that she hoped I did not feel attacked. She said the story was for everyone, not just us. I replied quietly that I had heard enough to understand my place in it. She rolled her eyes and told a coworker that I was sensitive about art. I stepped away from the group and went to the far edge of the rooftop. The city looked different from up there, like a map instead of a place where people lived. Nadia appeared beside me with a glass of water. She said she had watched the performance and that it had not felt fair. I told her I was fine, just tired. She did not push. She asked if I wanted a recording of what happened, in case the online version changed later. Her question surprised me. I said that if she had filmed any of it, I would appreciate a copy. She nodded and showed me a short video she had taken where Jade described the friend who ignored her no and walked straight into a husband role. In the back of the frame, my own face was visible, still and small. I sent the file to myself, then thanked her. On the way home, Jade walked a little ahead again. The streets were dark and quieter than the bar. She talked fast about the performance, about how the audience had reacted, about how many people had recorded. She said this would make a strong post about healing from people who ruin bonds. She added that she hoped I saw how important her work was and that I could learn not to center myself in every story. I told her in a steady voice that she had taken a complicated history and pressed it into a shape that made me look dangerous. I said it hurt to hear my life turned into a cautionary tale. She said I was proving her point, that I always made it about myself. By the time we reached our building, her voice had turned sharp and thin. In the stairwell, our words bounced off the walls. I kept my tone low, reminding her that neighbors could hear us. She said she did not care. She accused me of trying to silence her truth again. As she said it, I noticed a door on our floor open just a little. A slice of light and part of a face appeared, then stayed very still. I lowered my voice even more and suggested we continue inside. She muttered that our life was already public, then walked ahead, her steps hard on the concrete. I followed, aware that someone in that half-open doorway now had their own version of the story. Inside our apartment, Jade threw her bag onto the couch and pulled out her phone. I saw her thumb slide across the screen as she opened a recording app. There was a faint beep that I recognized from before. She started talking in a softer tone, describing the night for her followers, calling it heavy but healing. When she saw me glance at the phone, she ended the recording quickly and set it face down. I did not argue. I went to the small desk in the corner, opened my laptop, and added a new line to my spreadsheet. Rooftop bar, performance about ruined bond, multiple recordings, neighbor listening, recording app, beep at home. The columns looked simple and straight. Outside, a door in the stairwell closed with a dull sound. My phone, face down on the desk, buzzed once with a new message, and I had the clear thought that one day all these small noises and half-open doors might matter more than any applause she received tonight. The day of the family dinner started with the park, because Millie wanted swings and ice cream before she had to sit at a table and listen to adults talk. I agreed to meet Mara and her daughter there first. The park was bright and full of noise, children running, dogs pulling at their leashes. For a little while, the world felt simple again. Millie saw me and ran with her arms open, cardboard crown already slightly bent on her head. She said she was almost 8 now and that she wanted to go higher on the swing than last time. I pushed her gently, watching her shoes move through the air in slow arcs. Behind us, I could see Jade and her parents arrive. Jade walked with her phone out, talking in an animated way to Ruth. I heard my name and the word bond float across the grass. Ruth nodded and patted her arm, looking at me with a face that already had judgment in it. Millie's swing slowed after a few minutes. She twisted a little to look back at me. In a low voice, the way children speak when they are not sure if a question is allowed, she said that Aunt Jade had told her she once had a best friend who ruined their bond by loving her. She said her mother had told her that friend later became her husband. Then Millie asked if that friend was me, and if loving someone could really break them forever. The words landed in my chest like a stone dropped into a still pool. I swallowed and answered carefully. I told her love itself did not break people, but that sometimes the way people talked about love could be unfair. I said Aunt Jade had her own feelings about the past, and that I had mine, and that grown-ups sometimes told the story from only one side when they were hurt. I told her she did not have to be afraid of loving people, but that she should pay attention to whether they respected her too. She nodded in a slow, thoughtful way. Then she asked if we could still get ice cream later. I said yes, and for a few moments the heaviness loosened as she laughed about flavors. In the car on the way to the restaurant, Jade stared out the window, scrolling on her phone. I could see lines of text, hearts, and the word obsessive flash up and down the screen. She said quietly that she might share a short post from the open mic night, that people needed to see how bonds could survive even after being ruined by male ego. I kept my eyes on the road and said nothing. The restaurant had a long table pushed together from smaller ones, covered in a paper cloth already wrinkled by children's crayons. Balloons bobbed in the air above us. We took our seats, Jade near the middle, between Ruth and one of her cousins, me a little further down, between Helen and Mara. For a while, things stayed simple. Food arrived, candles were lit. Millie blew them out while people clapped. I almost believed we would move through the evening without my name becoming a lesson. Then one of Jade's cousins, cheeks already pink from drinks, raised his glass and said that since the theme of the month on Jade's page was bonds, she should tell everyone the story about her best friend who almost ruined everything. He said he loved that one. Several people around Jade laughed and nodded. They said they had seen pieces of it online but wanted the live version. Jade gave a shy act for a few seconds, then straightened and said she could share the short version. She spoke in the same smooth tone she used on camera. She described a lonely girl who had one safe friend in her life. She said she had begged him not to confess his feelings because she needed a place without pressure. She emphasized that she had asked him clearly to protect their bond. Then she said he had confessed anyway, that he had made her feel guilty for not loving him back, that he had worn her down until she agreed to date him. She called it a lesson in how even quiet men could be dangerous to your peace. She did not say my name, but she repeated details about his job in tech, his careful habits, his cooking, his long years of listening to her talk about other men. The table grew quieter as she spoke. Eyes slid toward me, then away, like guilty hands. Ruth reached over and squeezed Jade's arm, saying that some men pretended to be safe until they wanted more. She said Jade had been brave to call it what it was. Helen sat very still beside me, hands folded, eyes on her napkin. Mara looked back and forth between Jade and me, her face pale. After a long pause, Ruth added that she was just grateful Jade had found the strength to speak out, and that not all wounds were visible. The cousin who had asked for the story looked at me with a mix of pity and suspicion. I felt anger rise like heat under my skin, but I held it down. When there was a gap in the noise, I spoke in a low, even voice. I said I remembered the night in my kitchen very clearly. I said I told Jade the truth once, and that when she asked me not to say it again, I stepped back and respected that. I added that later, she chose to date me on her own. I said I had never told her she owed me love as payment for friendship. I kept my eyes on the table, not on her, and I did not raise my tone. I finished by saying those were the facts from my side, that I understood she felt hurt, but that certain words, like dangerous, were heavy to use in front of a child. For a moment, no one spoke. The cousin coughed and looked away. Tom shifted in his chair, his hand rubbing his forehead. Helen exhaled slowly, as if she had been holding her breath. Jade said in a tight voice that I was rewriting history to sound innocent, and that she had a right to tell her truth. Ruth jumped in and said that abusers always hid behind politeness. I did not answer. The servers arrived with more plates, breaking the scene. Conversations turned to work, school, and traffic, but a crack had opened that did not close. Later, in the hallway near the restrooms, Helen touched my arm and asked if I was all right. I told her I was tired. She said she had watched the way Jade told the story and that something inside her had snapped. She said she had always tried to give Jade the benefit of the doubt because of her own past, but that watching her enjoy the attention while I sat still made her feel sick. She told me there were ways to protect myself that did not involve shouting, and that I needed to think about how long I wanted to live as the enemy in someone else's story. Her words were soft but firm. After the dinner, Jade suggested we stop at the supermarket to pick up snacks and a few things Ruth wanted. We walked under the bright lights of the aisles, pushing a cart together that suddenly felt like a prop. At the checkout, while we waited in line, a woman from our building stepped in behind us. She smiled at Jade first and said she loved her recent posts about escaping a controlling husband who was once a clingy friend. Then she turned to me and said she was sorry I had been so unwell and hoped I was getting help. She said it as if my guilt were an established fact, like the price of milk. I felt Jade watching me closely. I gave the neighbor a small, polite smile and said, in a calm voice, that I did not discuss private matters with people who only knew us through screens. I thanked her for her concern and turned back to the conveyor belt, placing items one by one. The neighbor's smile faded. The cashier looked down, pretending not to hear. On the drive home, Jade accused me of trying to make her look like a liar. I did not rise to it. Back in our apartment, when the groceries were packed away and Jade had disappeared into the bedroom with her phone, I stood alone in the kitchen. The wall calendar hung near the fridge, mostly filled with birthdays and bills. I picked up a red pen from the counter. Slowly, without pressing hard, I drew a circle around a date a few weeks away. Under it, I stuck a small yellow note from the stack beside the fridge. On the note, in plain letters, I wrote, "Bring forms." The ink dried quickly. The circle and the note looked simple, almost like a reminder for a dentist visit. From the living room, I could hear Jade's soft voice as she recorded another story for her followers, telling them about difficult family dinners and brave women who spoke out. I stood there, looking at the red ring and the small words below it, and realized that if her voice kept painting me as a warning, then my silence would have to end in a place where stories were checked against something firmer than sympathy. The first night I took my pillow to the guest room, Jade stood in the hallway like a judge at the door of a cell. She crossed her arms and asked why I was being dramatic. She said sleeping apart would only prove to her followers that I was cold and punishing. I told her, in a level voice, that I needed sleep and space to think. I said the arguments and the posts had turned our bedroom into a stage. I said I did not want to perform every night. She said I was making her the villain for telling her truth, and that this separation would become part of her story whether I liked it or not. I picked up my folded shirts without replying and walked past her. The guest room was small, with a narrow bed and a wardrobe that smelled faintly of dust. I set my pillow down and placed my phone on the low nightstand. As I slid hangers across the rail, the bedspread rustled and the room began to feel like a border, not just a spare place. When I finally lay down, the silence sounded different from the silence in our shared room. It was not full of someone else's breathing or the faint clicks of her screen. It was just my own thoughts, loud and sharp. After a few minutes, my phone lit up beside me. A message from the contact saved as a simple shield emoji blinked on the screen, asking if I still wanted to talk later in the week. I stared at it for a long time. Then I typed that I did and that Thursday worked. The reply came quickly, confirming a time and an address. I locked the phone and let the room go dark again, feeling both exposed and strangely solid. In the morning, the house felt rearranged, even though nothing had moved except my clothes. In the kitchen, Jade acted shocked to see me walk in from the guest room. She said it was emotionally abusive to withdraw like that. She said husbands slept beside their wives, even in hard times. I told her calmly that I cared about the marriage more than appearances. I said I could not think clearly while acting like everything was fine. I added that distance might stop us from saying things we could not take back. She said I already said the worst things by refusing to validate her healing. While she talked, I noticed our 2 mugs on the counter, placed on opposite sides of the stove, handles turned away from each other. It was a small, silly detail, but it matched the split I felt. After she left for a brunch meeting, the apartment dropped into a quiet that felt like a held breath. I went to the little desk in the corner of the living room. The plain folder from HR lay beside my laptop, along with some unopened mail and the Bring Forms sticky note I had taken down from the wall to keep with me. I opened the laptop and saw the Archive A and Archive B folders waiting. Inside Archive A, I made 3 new folders and named them Household, Bank, and Work. The names looked normal, almost boring. I opened the HR scans and moved them into Work. Then I dug through the mail stack, pulling out bills with both our names on them, pay stubs, old lease copies, and anything that showed the structure of our life together. I scanned each one. With every new file, the same cloud sync message appeared. File uploaded successfully. The repetition calmed me. These were not accusations, just facts, dates, numbers, signatures. No one could call them dramatic. After a while, I took out a fresh binder and slid a simple label into the spine. Household. I filled its clear sleeves with printed copies of the same documents, arranging them by month. The binder was thin at first, then slightly thicker. It still looked like something you could ignore on a shelf, which is exactly what I wanted. When I heard the main door of the building close downstairs, I knew someone had entered. The faint sound of heels told me it was probably not Jade yet, but the noise reminded me how thin the walls of our life were. I took a small USB stick from the drawer, wrote today's date on a piece of tape, and wrapped it around the plastic. Then I copied the most important files from Archive A and Archive B onto it. When the progress bar finished, I opened the bottom drawer, lifted a worn folder labeled Taxes, and taped the USB stick to its underside. The drawer slid shut with a soft, final sound just as footsteps passed our door. Later that week, on the red-circled day, I drove to the address under the shield emoji in my phone. It turned out to be a plain building near the business district, with a gray lobby and a smell of paper and coffee. I sat in my car for a moment in the parking garage, the engine off, the air cool. I called the contact before going in, speaking with my phone pressed close. I described, in simple factual sentences, what had been happening. The posts about the ruined bond, the open mic performance, the family dinner, the neighbor at the supermarket, the HR meeting. I said I did not want to fight online or shout at anyone. I said I only wanted to know what a person could do when someone else's public story began to damage his work, his family, and his name. The voice on the other end was calm and patient. It asked me about dates and examples. It told me to keep doing what I was doing, saving posts, noting witnesses, organizing documents. It spoke about rights in general terms, about how there were places where words and evidence mattered more than emotions and applause. I listened more than I spoke. I did not ask for dramatic solutions. I asked for paths. When the call ended, I took a screenshot of the call log and saved it to work. Then I left the building without going upstairs. I did not need more that day. At home that evening, Mara stopped by with Millie to drop off a book I had loaned her. Millie ran into the living room and jumped onto the guest bed, asking if it was a sleepover bed now. Mara saw the pillow, the folded blanket, and the slightly disturbed sheets. Her eyes flicked between that room and the main bedroom door. She did not ask direct questions. She just looked at me and said she hoped I was making choices that kept me safe. Jade came out of the bedroom and immediately told Mara that I had abandoned the shared bed because I could not handle her honesty. Mara glanced at me again. I simply said that I needed space to think, and that I was tired of arguing in circles. I did not try to make Mara choose sides. That night, after they left, Jade followed me down the hall as I carried a glass of water to the guest room. She said my distance was proof of my guilt. She said her followers would see this as punishment for her healing. I told her in a quiet voice that my actions were not for her followers. I said I had spent years letting her story define me, and that I was done living only inside her version. She asked if I was planning something. She wanted to know why there were new binders on the shelf and why the desk drawer seemed harder to open. I told her I was simply organizing our life because I needed to see it clearly. I added that there were times when clarity mattered more than comfort. She said that sounded like a threat. I shook my head and told her I did not threaten people. I said I handled things properly. As I set the glass on the nightstand, my phone buzzed with a soft alarm. The screen lit up in the dim room, showing the label I had given it days ago. Paper drop 10:30 a.m. The sound was quiet, almost gentle. Jade saw the light and asked what it was. I silenced the alarm with one tap and met her eyes. I told her it was just a reminder. Then I said, in a slow, even tone, that she should keep every post, video, and story exactly as it was, because sometimes the things people share for healing end up being very important in other rooms. She stared at me for a long second, trying to read a threat that was not there, only decision. She turned away with a sharp breath and slammed the hallway light off. In the darkness, with only the memory of that small, glowing label in my eyes, I lay back on the narrow bed and felt, for the first time, less like a character in her story and more like someone quietly writing the last act of his own. The office tower lobby felt cold and bright, with polished stone and quiet echoes. Jade walked in ahead of me with her phone raised, telling her followers she was finally cutting ties with the man who had ruined their bond. Theo waited near the seats. I stood by a pillar with Nadia at my side, her hand resting on my arm. A man in a plain jacket stepped forward and asked for Jade by her full name. She answered without lowering her phone. He gave her a thick envelope and said it was a civil complaint and takedown demand about things she had said and posted. She opened it and saw screenshots of her threads, still frames from the open mic night, and a list of dates and links. She looked at me and said I was attacking her healing. I told her in a low voice that I was not attacking her, only asking that she stop naming me as a danger I had never been. Then I turned toward the glass doors and walked out into the daylight with Nadia, leaving her standing there with the papers in her hands.